On my 27th birthday, the city glowed the way Los Angeles always did when it wanted to look perfect. The streets shimmered with rain that hadn't actually fallen, just reflected light from billboards and passing cars. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at a dress I hadn't worn in years. Soft navy silk, one frayed seam under the arm. It used to make me feel confident. Now it just reminded me of how much I'd been trying to hold together. Rent was due in 6 days. My last freelance invoice hadn't cleared. My laptop charger was held together with tape. And still, my mother insisted I come to dinner at Aurelia, a rooftop restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly groceries. "Dress nicely," she'd said. "It's your birthday. We'll celebrate properly." Celebrate what? Losing my job 3 weeks ago when the design firm restructured? The overdraft creeping closer every day? Still, in my family, skipping a dinner invitation wasn't an option. The Hargroves didn't cancel plans. They simply endured them with grace. I looked at my reflection. Tired eyes, a faint line between my brows that hadn't been there last year, and whispered, "You can do this." "Lila." Then I slipped on the dress. The restaurant glittered above downtown LA, all glass walls and gold light. My parents were already seated when I arrived, Margaret in a champagne-colored gown, her pearls glowing beneath the chandelier, and Edward, scrolling through emails even as the waiter poured his wine. "Sweetheart," my mother said, standing to kiss my cheek without touching it. "You look lovely. Tired, though. Working too much again?" "Something like that," I murmured. Dad looked up just long enough to nod. "Traffic?" "Fine. That was our rhythm." Questions asked out of habit, not interest. I took my seat, folded the linen napkin across my lap, and tried not to glance at the empty chair across from me. My mother noticed. "Oh, don't worry. Your grandfather is on his way. He insisted on joining. Said he had a surprise for you." I blinked. "Grandpa Leonard? He never leaves the house for dinners." Her smile flickered. "Well, he's in one of his sentimental moods." That should have been my first warning. The waiter brought champagne. My parents talked about their new house in Brentwood, their remodel, their trip to Italy next month. Every sentence sounded like a commercial. I nodded when required, my smile mechanical. Then the door opened, and Leonard Hargrove walked in. The noise of the restaurant dimmed in my head. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Thinner, paler, but his presence still filled the room. The maitre d' nearly tripped over himself pulling out a chair. "Happy birthday, Lila." His voice was gravel and warmth, the only one that ever sounded real in this family. He hugged me, solid and sure. "You're my favorite 27-year-old in the world." "Thanks, Grandpa." I smiled genuinely for the first time that night. "I didn't know you were coming." "Wouldn't miss it." He sat beside me, ordered whiskey neat, and turned to my parents. "You both look well." Margaret's fingers tightened around her glass. "Always good to see you, Dad." He nodded, taking a slow sip before continuing. "And tonight, I thought we'd toast to Lila's success, and to her future." I gave a small laugh. "Success might be a stretch." He raised his glass, cutting me off gently. "Oh, I think you've done well enough for someone with a trust fund that large." The sound of clinking silver stopped. I frowned. "What trust fund?" My mother's laugh came out too fast, too bright. "Dad, really?" He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me, the one I set up for you when you were born. "It should be worth around $3.2 million by now." My fork slipped from my hand. The table fell silent. Dad cleared his throat. "Leonard, perhaps we shouldn't—" "Where is it?" Grandpa asked quietly. My mother's color drained. "Dad, where is it?" The air between us turned heavy, electric. I stared at my parents, waiting for them to laugh, to explain that this was some misunderstanding. But my father's eyes dropped to his napkin, and my mother's smile froze like a mask cracking under heat. The waiter appeared with dessert menus, took one look at the table and vanished again. Grandpa's voice stayed calm. "You two were named co-trustees. The account was to be transferred to Lila when she turned 25. That was 2 years ago. I checked this week. The balance is $275,000. The numbers didn't register at first. Then they did. $275,000 out of more than $3 million. My chest tightened. What happened to it? Mom reached for my hand, the motion rehearsed. Sweetheart, you have to understand, there were difficult years. The market crashed, your father's investments needed support, and so you used my money? My voice came out small but sharp. Temporarily, Dad said quickly. We meant to reinvest. Grandpa slammed his hand against the table. The glasses jumped. You stole from her. Every head in the restaurant turned, then turned away again. He looked at me, eyes softer now. Come with me, Lila. We'll talk privately. The private dining room was cold, dimly lit. A woman stood waiting. Evelyn Price, my grandfather's attorney, tablet in hand, a small mountain of folders beside her. Everything's ready. Mr. Hargrove, she said. My parents followed reluctantly, my mother's heels clicking like a countdown. Grandpa nodded to Evelyn. Show her. Evelyn tapped the screen, turning it toward me. Account records. Transaction logs. Years of withdrawals. Mortgage payments, car purchases, wire transfers labeled personal expense. Line after line of proof. I felt like I was falling. A house. 2 cars. Vacations. All with my trust. Dad's jaw tightened. We kept meticulous records. It's not like we hid it. You just didn't tell me it existed, I said. That's hiding. Mom's voice broke. Lila, we did it for your future. For stability. You were so young, so impulsive. Stop, Grandpa said, voice low but firm. Do not insult her intelligence to justify your greed. He turned to Evelyn. List every major withdrawal. She read flatly, like reading a eulogy. Mortgage payoff, $480,000. Renovation loan, $300,000. Vehicle purchases, 2 Mercedes S-Class sedans, $240,000. Investment in Hargrove Estates LLC, $600,000, later declared bankrupt. Real estate purchase, coastal property in Santa Barbara, $1.5 million, currently titled to Edward and Margaret Hargrove. My mother's hand went to her throat. Dad, please, you bought a beach house with her money. Grandpa's tone wasn't angry anymore. It was sorrowful. And you lied to her for years. I couldn't breathe. I looked at them, the people who taught me manners, who told me honesty mattered, and realized I didn't know them at all. Grandpa leaned forward. Give me the keys. What? Mom whispered. The Santa Barbara property. The cars, the house. Everything bought with her money. Hand them over now. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a ring of keys, silver catching the low light, and set them on the table. They trembled between us. Grandpa pushed them toward me. These are yours, Lila. They always were. My fingers hovered over them. They looked ordinary. They weren't. They were proof. Mom started to cry softly, the way she always did when she wanted sympathy. You can't do this, Dad. We're family. He looked at her with something between pity and exhaustion. Family doesn't steal from its own. He stood, signaling to Evelyn. Prepare the documentation. Effective immediately, transfer all assets back to Lila's name. And begin proceedings. My mother's sob turned sharp. Proceedings? You can't mean legal action, he said simply. Full audit. Possible criminal charges, unless Lila decides otherwise. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. I picked up the keys, cold against my skin. My voice barely rose above a whisper. I just need time. Grandpa nodded. You'll have it. But know this. They were planning to leave. I found travel receipts. One-way tickets to Costa Rica, purchased 3 days ago. I stared at my parents. Their silence was the only confession I needed. They came to dinner knowing this was goodbye. Outside, the night wind was cool against my face. The restaurant's lights blurred behind me as I walked down the marble steps. Keys clutched tight in my hand. Every step felt heavier and lighter at the same time. When I reached my apartment, the tiny one in Echo Park with peeling, paint and a humming fridge, my roommate Jenna looked up from the couch. How was dinner? I closed the door and leaned against it. It wasn't a dinner. It was a funeral. She frowned. Whose? Mine, I said softly. And then theirs. I dropped the keys on the table. They clattered, bright, final, and I knew nothing about my life would ever be the same. Lila barely remembered the drive home that night. The air outside the restaurant was heavy, the Los Angeles sky bruised purple, the taste of betrayal still sharp on her tongue. Her grandfather, Richard, insisted she stay at his house for the night. She didn't argue. She didn't have the energy to. Inside his Beverly Hills home, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, like a reminder of everything she'd lost. "Sit down, sweetheart," Richard said softly, his voice low and deliberate. He poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward her. Lila's hands trembled as she took it. "You knew," she whispered. "You've known for years, haven't you?" Richard nodded slowly. "Not for years. I suspected. Your father was always ambitious. Too ambitious. But I didn't want to believe he'd stoop to this." Her chest burned. "They stole from me," she said, each word bitter, deliberate. "They looked me in the eye every week, hugged me, told me they loved me. And all this time, they were spending my future like it was theirs." He leaned forward, his face heavy with regret. "They betrayed not just you, Lila. They betrayed the trust your grandmother and I had in them. But now you have the proof." Lila blinked through tears. "Proof?" He pulled a leather folder from his briefcase and opened it on the table. Bank statements, property titles, transfer receipts, each stamped, signed, and damning. I hired a forensic accountant after I noticed something off with the estate records. These documents trace every cent from your trust to your parents' accounts. Homes, vacations, the cars, even their so-called charity projects. Her stomach twisted. Every page felt like a knife. So what do I do now? Richard looked at her firmly. "You do what's right. But you must decide what justice means to you. Revenge will burn fast. Justice will take patience." Lila stared at the folder, then at him. For the first time that night, her anger steadied. "I'm not looking for revenge," she said quietly. "I just want my life back." The next morning, she woke to sunlight slicing through the curtains. For the first time in months, she felt a strange kind of clarity. Painful, yes, but clean. Her phone buzzed. Mom. She didn't answer. Instead, she sat at Richard's oak desk and opened her laptop. By noon, she had emailed 2 lawyers, one specializing in financial crimes and another in estate law. Both replied within hours. Richard's connections moved quickly. Within 2 days, she had meetings lined up, statements ready, and legal counsel advising her to stay calm. "They'll deny everything at first," one attorney warned. "People like your parents always do, but the evidence speaks louder than they can." Lila spent the week preparing. Every night she stayed in the guest room of her grandfather's house, surrounded by boxes of documents, her life reduced to files and figures. Sometimes she'd stare out the window at the city lights, wondering how many other people had been betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them. It was Friday when the storm finally came. Her parents arrived at Richard's estate uninvited, pulling up in their white Range Rover as if they still owned the world. Her mother, elegant as ever, wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Her father's jaw was set tight, a man who'd built a life on appearances and now saw the walls collapsing. "Lila," her mother began, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We need to talk." Lila didn't look up from the papers spread across the table. "Then talk," her father stepped forward. "Whatever your grandfather told you—" "Stop," she interrupted, her voice sharper than she expected. "I'm done listening to excuses." Richard walked in from the study then, calm but cold. "Good," he said, "because I'm not interested in hearing them either." Her mother turned toward him, her tone instantly defensive. "Richard, this isn't fair." He raised a hand. "Fair? You think stealing from your daughter's trust fund is fair?" Her father's face reddened. "We needed that money. You don't understand the pressure we were under." Lila slammed her hands on the table. "I was living off instant noodles while you were flying to Paris." Silence filled the room. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Her father's voice broke, the arrogance fading. "Lila, we thought we could fix it before you found out. We made some bad investments. "Stop pretending it was a mistake," she said. "You lied for years. Every birthday, every phone call, every fake 'we're so proud of you. You were spending my future." Her mother's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Richard stood between them, his voice low but full of finality. "You have one chance to make this right," he said. "Transfer every remaining cent back. Sell what you must. Cooperate fully. If you don't, she will press charges, and I will support her every step of the way." Her father clenched his fists. "You'd turn your back on your own son?" "I already did," Richard said quietly. "The day you betrayed your daughter." That night, Lila cried harder than she had in years. Not out of weakness, but because she was finally free to feel everything she'd been burying. The years of trying to earn their approval, the constant guilt, the loneliness, it all came crashing down. But beneath the grief, there was something else. Resolve. She woke the next morning with a plan. She met with her attorneys, signed statements, authorized formal filings. Her parents' accounts were frozen within a week. The scandal spread quickly. Her father's business associates distanced themselves. Their country club memberships were revoked. Their house listed quietly for sale. For a moment, Lila wondered if she should feel guilty. But then she remembered every promise they'd broken, every lie they'd told while smiling in her face. No, this was justice. Weeks passed. The legal proceedings moved forward with brutal precision. Her lawyers built a case that painted a clear picture: the theft, the deception, and the trail of luxury bought on her stolen inheritance. When the subpoenas arrived, her parents' lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but Lila refused. "I don't want money," she said simply. "I want accountability." Her grandfather watched her quietly, pride softening his features. "You're stronger than I ever was at your age," he said. She smiled faintly. "I had to be." By the time the court date arrived, the once powerful couple who'd ruled every family gathering sat quietly at the defense table. Faces pale, pride stripped away. Lila took the stand. Her voice didn't shake once. Afterward, when the verdict came down, restitution ordered, assets seized, names dragged through headlines, Lila didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. She just walked outside into the Los Angeles sunlight and breathed. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. Richard met her on the courthouse steps. "You did it," he said softly. Lila smiled through tears. "No," she said. "I just stopped letting them win." Los Angeles had always felt too big for Lila. Too loud, too quick, too full of people who pretended to be fine while falling apart inside. But that spring, the city began to breathe differently. So did she. The court case was over. The headlines had faded. Her parents were stripped of their illusions. The mansion foreclosed, the cars repossessed, and the family name, once spoken with pride, now whispered in shame. Her grandfather Richard had offered her a blank check to start over. But Lila refused. "I want to do this myself," she told him. "I need to." And so she began, again, quietly. She rented a small apartment in Silver Lake, a sunlit corner with cracked hardwood floors and plants she could barely keep alive. She started sketching again. Lines and fabrics, soft silhouettes. Design had always been her language when words failed her. Now, it became therapy. The first few months were a haze of exhaustion. Some days she woke up angry. Other days she couldn't move at all. But she kept drawing. One afternoon, while scrolling through old photos on her laptop, she came across an image from 3 years ago, her mother wearing one of Lila's earliest designs. A white linen dress she'd sewn by hand. Her mother had smiled so warmly that day. Lila had believed that smile. She stared at the photo for a long time before closing it. The pain didn't vanish. It just became part of the background. Like a faint scar you learn to live with. A few months later, she reopened Luna Atelier, her small boutique that had closed when her funds disappeared. This time, she rebuilt it from the ground up. New name, new logo, new purpose. She called it Alinea, meaning a new beginning. Richard showed up at the opening day in a navy suit, carrying a bouquet of white tulips, her grandmother's favorite. "You've done something remarkable, Lila," he said softly. "Most people would have disappeared after what happened." She smiled, still tired, but lighter now. "I did disappear for a while, but maybe that's what I needed." The boutique was modest, polished concrete floors, clean lines, warm lighting. Her designs hung neatly on brass racks, linen dresses, hand-dyed silks, cropped jackets. They were simple, but bold, real, just like her. Within months, Alinea began gaining attention. Local bloggers featured her pieces. Stylists stopped by for fittings. Then an editor from Vogue LA visited and offered to feature her story. Lila hesitated. "I don't want pity," she told Richard that evening. He smiled gently. "Then don't tell them a story of pity. Tell them one of power," so she did. The article went viral. From betrayal to brilliance, the rebirth of designer Lila Mercer. Her inbox exploded. Orders flooded in. Alinea became a symbol of quiet resilience. But success brought something unexpected. Silence. One evening, after a long day at the studio, she drove along the coast, windows down, salt wind tangling her hair. She parked near El Matador Beach and walked barefoot along the sand. The city lights a faint glow behind her. For the first time, she realized how deeply alone she'd felt all those years, even before the betrayal. Her parents had loved her only as long as she was useful. When she needed them most, their love turned conditional. Now she had her freedom, but freedom could be lonely too. She sat on a rock, watching waves crash under the moonlight. A quiet voice broke through her thoughts. "You always did like this spot." She turned. It was Daniel, an old friend from college, a photographer who'd once helped her shoot her early designs before she could afford models. She hadn't seen him in 4 years. He looked older, too. Softer. "Hey," he said, smiling cautiously. She smiled back. "Hey, what are you doing here?" "Work," he said, lifting his camera. "What about you?" "Trying to remember who I am without all the noise." He nodded slowly. "Seems like you're doing okay at that." They talked for hours, the way people do when time doesn't matter. About everything and nothing. Art, loss, what forgiveness might feel like someday. Before leaving, he said, "You know, you don't have to do everything alone." She didn't answer. But the word stayed. Weeks passed, and Daniel started visiting her studio, helping with product photos, offering quiet company. He never asked about her parents, never pushed, just showed up when she needed an extra hand or a reason to laugh. It wasn't love at first. It wasn't fireworks or grand confessions. It was slower, like light returning after a storm. One evening, she found herself smiling as she pinned fabric on a mannequin. Richard noticed. "Someone's making you happy," he teased. She laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe, but I'm learning to make myself happy first." He nodded approvingly. That's the hardest lesson of all. Months turned into a year. Her parents, now living quietly in a rented condo on the outskirts of town, tried to reach out twice. Letters arrived, apologies inked on expensive stationery, words too late to matter. She read them once, folded them neatly, and placed them in a box. Not out of hate, but closure. She didn't need revenge anymore. She didn't need them to understand. She had already won. Alinea expanded to New York that fall. Her designs were now carried by 2 high-end retailers. She traveled for interviews, fashion weeks, collaborations, but she never lost the grounded calm she'd found in rebuilding. During a speech at a small design school event, she was asked how she found the strength to keep going. She paused, smiled faintly, and said, "I stopped waiting for people to love me the way I deserved. I started loving myself enough to begin again." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that comes when truth hits home. That night, she returned to the same beach, barefoot again. The moonlight glittered on the waves. She thought of the girl she'd been, scared, betrayed, desperate for her parents' approval. She closed her eyes, whispered softly, "I forgive you. But I'm free now." Behind her, she heard footsteps. Daniel, carrying 2 cups of coffee, grinning. "Talking to the ocean again?" he teased. She smiled. "Just saying goodbye." He handed her a cup. "Then here's to new beginnings." They stood together in silence, the tide curling at their feet. When she finally looked back at the city lights of Los Angeles, they no longer felt too big. They felt like hers.